Hello my friends, my name is Rich and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. On Greatest Rock and Metal I talk about what are for me the best albums and gigs in the history of rock and metal music, based on listening to thousands of albums and going to hundreds of gigs over many years. If you enjoy what you see, please press the red button to subscribe to the channel so that you can see future episodes. Today my focus is on the legendary, the iconic, the crazy Ozzy Osbourne. Today Ozzy Osbourne is pretty much a household name across the world for his various antics, for his wife, and amongst people like myself, for his contribution to music. And it's that I'm going to be talking about today. My first introduction to Ozzy Osbourne came with Black Sabbath. I had a couple of Black Sabbath albums that I got in late 79 and 80s. Those two Black Sabbath albums with Ozzy were Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and Paranoid albums. But to be honest, at that particular time I was so young, I just saw them as Black Sabbath. I didn't associate Ozzy as a singer in Black Sabbath. For me, Black Sabbath really started with Heaven and Hell album. That was the Black Sabbath album that I was mostly into. And I think as well, because it had an illustration of the band on the back of the album, I was able to start to identify more with the people in the band. And for me, the singer of Black Sabbath was Ronnie James Dio. So Ozzy hadn't really figured in my knowledge at that particular time. But fast forward a little bit, we get to 1983 and this video comes on the TV for the song Bark at the Moon. That was my introduction to Ozzy Osbourne. All of a sudden I started to find out more about who this guy was, put two and two together with the Black Sabbath connection, and started to then delve into his past, because I realized then that that Bark at the Moon wasn't actually the starting point for Ozzy Osbourne. His solo career actually started after he was fired from Black Sabbath in 1979. He was fired due to drug and alcohol addiction, a problem that he has suffered with most of his life and got him into various scrapes and difficulties that many of the people outside of the rock world know him for mostly. And in 1980 he got himself together with the help of his now wife Sharon Osbourne, who at that particular time was his manager. And he was able to get together a band. The name of the band was titled Blizzard of Oz. That actually created some controversy later, because when Blizzard of Oz album hit really big, Sharon decided that actually we're going to name this band Ozzy Osbourne, and it's going to be a solo band and not a band. And that created many problems in going forward, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. And the band consisted of hotshot young guitarist Randy Rhoads, Lee Kerslake on drums, and Bob Daisley on bass guitar. Now then, so it's 1980 and the Blizzard of Oz album is released. And actually I'm talking about this because it's the 40th anniversary year of that album. We'll come on to the album a little bit later. Moving forward in history a little bit, sadly and tragically, Randy Rhoads died after only one more studio album with Ozzy. He died in a plane crash. And so Bark at the Moon was the debut for their new guitarist, a guy by the name of Jake E. Lee. And in fact, the album they did after that, 1986's Ultimate Sin album, was the album that shot Ozzy Osbourne to massive fame throughout the world as a solo artist, and ever since then it's a fame that he has kept to this day. So that's a little bit of history of Ozzy Osbourne solo and my history with the Ozzy Osbourne band. I'd like now to talk about this album. Like I say, it's the 40th anniversary of the Blizzard of Oz album, and this is a brand new edition that has been released for the 40th anniversary on vinyl. You'll see inside have lyrics and logo and a beautiful red and black marbled version of the album. And what an album this is. 1980 was a year in which so many amazing rock and metal albums were released, and this is amongst them. The set lists for Ozzy shows ever since this date have always had a large number of songs from this album in it, because it is an album that is all killer and no filler without any shadow of a doubt. The introduction of the guitarist Randy Rhoads was a masterstroke. Not only was he a brilliant guitarist, he was a brilliant songwriter as well, and he was able to combine some of his classical influences and jazz influences in order to create some superb songs for both this album and the follow-up album, Diary of a Madman. If I had to pick 4 of my favourites from this particular album, well, I would go with the opening track, I Don't Know. It's just a brilliant guitar riff that comes into this song and really hooks you right from the off. I couldn't actually believe it when I first heard this album and I heard the song I Don't Know. It was quite different from anything that I'd heard before. It had great melody to it. It had this brilliant riff, as I say, and it really is a fantastic way to start an album, fantastic way to start a concert. A classic to this day. As is the next track I will choose, which is the second track on the album, and probably the most famous Ozzy Osbourne solo song, titled Crazy Train. Massive song in America, still played to this day on American radio and at sports events, I believe, as well. Great chorus. I'm going up the rails on a crazy train. And the song for his life, because that's what his life has been, constantly going off the rails on his crazy train. And what more can I say? It's along with the Black Sabbath song Paranoid, those 2 songs are pretty much Ozzy Osbourne's signature songs. The next track I would choose would be Suicide Solution. Now this was a track that got a lot of publicity in the 80s because very sadly a young boy killed himself, committed suicide, and it was said that this song had caused him to do that, and there was a court case that was eventually dismissed about this particular song, about whether or not it had caused his suicide. And as Ozzy said all along, that this particular song was actually an anti-suicide song. It was trying to warn of the dangers of being an alcoholic, and how that drinking too much alcohol can depress you and cause you many problems. So more of a warning shot. And then the final track I would choose would be, it's more of a ballad song. It's titled Revelation and Mother Earth. It's a fantastic song. There's some brilliant, brilliant guitar solo work in this song. And remember, this song is written 40 years ago. And it's actually quite sad to think that the lyrics today to this song are just as relevant today as they were 40 years ago. It's basically about, in my mind, it's about how as humans we continue to kill our planet. We don't take care of Mother Earth. And in my opinion, I think COVID has kind of been a bit of Mother Earth's revenge on all of us through not taking care of our planet and the animals on the planet as well. So there you have it. That's my brief summary review of what is just a brilliant album. If you do not have this in your collection, whatever you may think of Ozzy Osbourne, and I know some people struggle with his image and some people struggle with actually the sound of his voice. He's got a very, very unique voice. But no one can doubt the quality of the songs on this album throughout. Highly, highly recommended album. Okay, so that's my thoughts on the album. I'm going to talk then about seeing Ozzy live. But before I do that, let's take a look at Rock T-shirts by the Sea. Hope you enjoyed that. Before I talk about Ozzy live, one thing I'd just like to mention about the Blizzard of Oz album. If you don't have it in your collection and you're thinking about buying it, do not buy a version that is released between 2002 or 2009. Why do I say that? Well, one of the things I hinted at earlier was problems over the naming of the band and whether or not this was a band or a solo outing for Ozzy. The main songwriter in the early days with Ozzy was a guy by the name of Bob Daisley, who played bass on the album. And as I said, the drummer was a guy called Lee Kerslake. And they had a lot of problems with the Ozzy management over getting credits for their work on this album and on the Diary of a Madman album. And not just getting credit, but getting some money from it. As a result of some lawsuits that they then took out on Ozzy and the record label, Sharon Osbourne, Ozzy's manager, decided to take their bass and drum tracks off the releases that were released between 2002 and 2009 and replace them with drum and bass from guys who were in Ozzy's touring band at that particular time. Robert Trujillo, who currently plays with Metallica, and Mike Bordin, who is the Faith No More drummer. So if you want the original sound, make sure you buy releases that are outside of that time period. Okay, so let's move on to Ozzy live. Now, my first time seeing Ozzy live was at the Donington Rock Festival in 1984 that I've spoken about many times on previous episodes. So I'm not going to talk about my first Ozzy live experience. There's the tour shirt from 1984's Bark at the Moon tour. I'm going to talk about this one. The next time I saw Ozzy live, which was on the Ultimate Sin tour. And that gig was at the Manchester Apollo in the UK. There is the very well worn ticket. And that gig was in February 1986. And what was the price of the ticket? It was a grand total of £6 and 50 pence. Way bargain to see the Ozzy Osbourne solo band. And also, you may have noticed on the ticket, I'm sure it was that visible on the video, the support band was this band, Rat, who were a very big band in America at that time, and they were trying to crack Europe as well. Never really did that well in Europe. I'm going to talk about Rat on a future episode. So, Ozzy and the Ultimate Sin Tour. I've got a set list here, just as a reminder. One thing I will say is that the Ultimate Sin album, which was the next album after Bark at the Moon, was a huge album for Ozzy. Even though he'd got very, very big in America on the Diary of a Madman tour, his album sales hadn't reflected as popular as he was until the Ultimate Sin album. In the year of its release, it went platinum in 1986, and then he had a huge hit single with the song Shot in the Dark, and the video at the time was all over MTV, music television, something that doesn't really exist anymore. We call it YouTube now, I guess. And so the video was all over MTV, and what was interesting as well, this was the time within rock and metal music that glam was very much in vogue. We had Motley Crue, we had Rat, we had Cinderella, we had Poison, all with big hair and makeup. And Ozzy, who was kind of seen as more of a, even in those days, seen as a grandfather of heavy metal, having come from Black Sabbath, and discarded his hippie image and actually went for the glamour look. And the Ultimate Sin Tour is the ultimate in the Ozzy glam period. So, what a show! What a show! Of course, any of you who have seen Ozzy live will know that Ozzy Osbourne shows live are always great entertainment. Not necessarily the best vocally, musically always spot on, because he has always surrounded himself with high quality musicians. And in fact, on this particular tour, Jakey Lee was still the guitarist. He had a guy called Phil Soussan on bass guitar, and the late great Randy Castillo on drums. A brilliant, brilliant musical band. But often Ozzy struggles to keep in tune playing live. A lot of that is because he's running around so much, encouraging and with the crowd and joking with the crowd and having a good time. And that's what a concert should be about. If you want to hear perfection, listen to the albums. If you want to have a good time, go to the concerts. That's always been my motto. So, the set list on this particular show, a great representation of the new album, which even though it was a big seller, it wasn't necessarily one of his greatest albums. There's some good tracks on here for sure, and some of those were played live, so Thank God for the Bomb and Killer of Giants. I've always liked those particular songs. I do like the single Shot in the Dark as well. And but we were lucky enough on this show that we got a great representation of his discography to date. The show opened with Bark at the Moon, brilliant show opener. It's always a toss for me if what I would like the show to open with on Ozzy, I Don't Know, or Bark at the Moon. Probably Bark at the Moon. I just think that really gets the crowd into it right from the beginning. And the tracks we got from Blizzard of Oz, we got Suicide Solution, we got Mr. Crowley, I Don't Know, and Crazy Train, all played. And also we got a couple of Black Sabbath songs, Iron Man, and of course the constant amongst Ozzy set lists as the last song he plays on all of his gigs, Paranoid. It was a great show and one of my earliest ever gigs. I'm still pretty young in 1986 going to gigs, so it's always very, very exciting to go to these things. And in fact, it's still exciting to go to gigs, and I cannot wait for COVID to be over so that we can all get back to going to gigs again. So there you have it. That's a brief summary of my live experience of Ozzy Osbourne, and since that particular time I've seen him live many times with both his solo band and with Black Sabbath. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, please press the red button to subscribe to the channel to see future episodes. Like I said earlier, there will definitely be a future episode on Rat, and also future episodes on Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne. I will leave you with my 4 favourite Ozzy Osbourne solo albums. Of course, Blizzard of Oz, and that's the number 1. Without any shadow of a doubt, that is the place to start. And the follow-up to Blizzard of Oz, Diary of a Madman. That would be my second place to start. Those 2 albums are untouchable. No More Tears album. This was the second album that he did with another guitarist who pretty much became the main guitarist in the band, a guy by the name of Zakk Wylde. And he's done many albums and many tours with Zakk Wylde as guitarist. And let's bring it to more recent times. I would also highly recommend the newest album from Ozzy, titled Ordinary Man. Very strong album. There's some great songs on here, and it's actually quite surprising to have such a great Ozzy Osbourne album so late into his career. And a lot of the songwriting for this was done by a guy who I'd never heard of before until this particular album, Andrew Watt. What's also interesting about this album is that the drums on nearly all of the tracks are played by the drummer from Red Hot Chili Peppers, Chad Smith, and the bass is played by Guns N' Roses bassist Duff McKagan. And there's also some solo appearances by Slash on guitar on some of the tracks. So, highly recommended album as well. There you go. Thank you very much. And remember, until next time, as always, we rock!